Hello, everyone on Zoom. Oops, this is the microphone I want. We're gonna give you about give it about 5 more minutes. We have a few people trickling in, so just hang tight. Thanks. Okay, you ready?
We're just chatting one day.
I need to speak into,
You can speak right here and they'll pick up here, but speak into this mic too, and they'll probably tell me if there's something you hear the sound of it.
okay,
Yeah.
And you can start.
okay. How do I, oh, do I need to like get over to the, how do I go to the next slide?
Should be.
Oh, there it is. Oh, that's just the toolbar.
I don't know how to move.
Oh, was that not one of those?
That's it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to everyone that is here on Zoom and to the folks that are here in person. I appreciate you coming out. And if anyone is having any trouble hearing me, please definitely let me know. All right. You are here to learn and discuss a little bit about a project idea that we are putting forward and the grant that a grant proposal that we're working on at the library with Ecotone. And it's called, well, Ecotone is working on it and I'm just kind of helping a little bit. They've been doing all the hard stuff. It's called 5-Star Urban Waters Restoration Grant, and it's from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So we are going to start off with, whoa. There we go. One of the first things that I want to share is this is our agenda for the evening. But before I go into that, I just want to say that this is an idea, and it is a grant a grant proposal that is being written based on this idea. We are presenting it to folks in the community to get your ideas and to get feedback and to help us build on this or not. It kind of depends on what everybody thinks, because this is a proposal for a community project. And so we need to get, or I need to get a sense of if the community wants this project to happen or not, or wants us to give it a try. And that's part of kind of what I'm looking for here tonight. We're also sharing information about it. You need to know what it is in order to make any sort of decision or judgment. And you certainly don't have to decide anything right now. You can if you want, or maybe you already know. But nothing about this is set in stone just yet. We're nearing the end of putting the grant together, but there's a long, even if the community doesn't feel that this is a good project for us to pursue, then we don't have to submit it. And if we do submit it and we get offered the money, we don't have to take it. This is the first of a series of community meetings where we hope to have a conversation about how we can work together as a community to protect and support our watershed. We also have a form a paper form here that you can fill out to give feedback, and to folks that are joining us on Zoom. We're going to share some ways that you can give feedback as well. So we're going to start tonight with some introductions of who we are and land acknowledgement. And we're going to talk a little bit about what this idea is and what the intent behind it is. We'll dive into the details of the grant and some of the activities that are the grant. This particular grant requires some hands-on activities, and so we have some ideas about what those could be. Would love to hear from you about those. Then we're going to have a break where we can talk to each other, ask questions, step away for a minute, and then we'll come back and we'll have a discussion. And so that will be a time, and you can, we have a small group tonight. Feel free to chime in and ask questions at any point, but we're really reserving the second half of this for like a time when we can all talk together and have like an open discussion about this. But definitely feel free to ask questions and at any point if there's something that's not clear. Okay. I feel like there was something else I was supposed to say and I'm not remembering it. We're going to start with a land acknowledgement. And when my we here is for me and Jan Willem and Adrian, and I encourage you to take part in the land acknowledgement. We feel that it's important to acknowledge the land that we are gathering on. We acknowledge that our meeting is taking place on occupied indigenous land. We acknowledge the ancestral lands of the Tiwa and Apache people. We honor these people past, present, and future. We acknowledge the history and ongoing colonization of where we are sitting right now in New Mexico and in our country. We acknowledge our own place in the story of colonization. We honor the diverse and vibrant Native communities that make their homes here today, specifically the Picaris and the Jicarilla Apache. My name is Rachel Exposito. I'm the director of the Embudo Valley Library. And I'll do the first little bit of the presentation. And we also have Jan Willem right here. Jan Willem, is it Janssens? Okay, thank you. I thought so, but I didn't want to, I was nervous. So Jan Willem Janssen is the owner of Ecotone Landscaping. And then we have Adrian Rosenberg, who also works with Ecotone and various other places around the community. I really appreciate both of you guys being here. Thank you so much. And we'll all take turns talking. Okay. So this project, basically the whole idea is that community members organize and create some sort of watershed protection group. And this grant that we've been looking at and working on creates a support system so that to help the community in making that happen. And that happens in various ways. We'll be talking about that throughout the evening. But specifically, it does that in creating and maybe even reestablishing some relationships between various agencies by providing some funding that can help this group begin, by providing some time and work that all of these the different folks that would be involved in the grant would be doing. So that is the creation of the grassroots community-based watershed protection group, and a local project coordinator, which they would be able to hire. So a lot of the funding from this particular grant would go towards paying for this coordinator. And we don't know who is going to be on that group. We don't know how many people are going to be on that group. We don't know what that group looks like. That is a part of all of the work that needs to happen as a part of the grant. And so this funding enables that work to happen. Or it makes it more likely that it will happen. It's not that it couldn't happen without it, but it does, it provides an impetus for that. So that's the first main part of the grant. And so when we talk about it being a capacity building grant, we're creating the capacity within the community to form this sort of group. Then the second part of the grant is outdoor hands-on educational workshops for community members, and we have thought that youth could be involved in that as well. The idea behind that is if we as a community are going to be doing this restoration work, we need to learn some of the skills to do the work. It's not, so it wouldn't just be about this group gets together and has meetings and makes decisions, but the idea behind it is also that we as a community know how to build some of these structures and do some of this work that Ecotone has been doing over the past decade plus. You guys feel like I touched on all the things? Okay. Okay, so grant details next. I believe this is Jan Willem.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad we have a good number of people participating. So my name is Jan Willem Janssens. I'm the owner and principal of Ecotone Landscape Planning. And like Rachel said, we've been here present in Dixon since around 2009 or 2010. And around that time, until 2014 or so, we did a series of projects. And then again, around 14, 15, 16, 17, and then again starting in 2019. This grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation is called the 5-Star Grant. It has a very particular goal, and that happens often with these requests for proposals. They have to focus on something particular. The foundation's goal for this funding is to develop community capacity to sustain local natural resources for future generations by providing modest financial assistance to diverse local partnerships focused on improving water quality, watersheds, and the species and habitats they support. So, as you can see, the Fish and Wildlife Foundation, of course, wants good fish and wildlife habitat and healthy streams. That's what this is about. But they have understood that it just doesn't happen by itself. They also know it just doesn't happen by doing some work and cleaning up a river. Eventually, and I really like their philosophy, they understand that is the relationship of people with their land and waters that ensures over time that it can sustain these natural resources for future generations and for all these habitats and animals. So that's what this is about. And the word capacity building, for those who are not familiar with that, is kind of jargon, it's kind of lingo, but it means that you actually create, you enable the social environment of a community to be able to do certain things, to organize itself so that you actually are able to take care of your natural resources. And there are various ways of doing that. It starts with making people interested by making them aware of their environment. So that often happens through education. And then the second step is to find local people who want to take action. And therefore you need to organize them and identify leaders. And then you need to make sure that the work that's being done is sustained by having a plan of how you can actually work on all those things in the future. So those are key elements that are part of this project. So they want, therefore, that there are 5 partners. And they realize that just one person or even one community cannot do it by itself. And that it is really important to learn from each other, and that these waters and lands that you're working on are often not owned by just one person or one community. And therefore, and that fits really well here in the Dixon area, that you have to work with your neighbors. And so you need to have, for this grant, 5 partners, 5 neighbors, 5 people who want to roll up their sleeves to do this work. Then they require that the project includes environmental education, outreach, and training. That's basically what I just mentioned. That's the foundation for capacity building, so that everybody is aware, has an understanding, and can do the work that needs to be done. Then the third one is that they want that work with these partners and all these people, and after that education, to have some underground results. So they hope that we can really literally roll up our sleeves and do some work on the ground to restore land or water. And then it needs to be measurable. We can just not work as if we're in a sandbox and have a good time. They also want to make sure that we can report that we did something effective. And then finally, that there is some idea of how what we're doing is being sustained or carries forward into the future. So if they're giving money, tens of thousands of dollars potentially, they want to make sure that that money is leveraged and not just ends when the project ends. So, and that is upon all of us to make sure that there is kind of a result that stays. How? Well, we can put some language in the proposal as to the ideas, but that is eventually the responsibility of everybody who participates. One of the ideas is, of course, to fund somebody, like Rachel mentioned, because if you actually have a funded position, then that person can raise other funding, so that the investment that this foundation makes is being paid forward by another person creating new funding for the community, for new positions, new learning, new things on the ground, new collaboration. Another way is that we all stay in touch through ongoing communication with those partners or with others that we pull in. And that is really up to this steering committee to figure out who needs to be invited, who needs to have a seat at the table. It doesn't have to be those 5 partners. So whatever is going to go on in the future could include those 5 partners, doesn't have to. And that is really the flexibility that this grant offers, which is really nice. Very few grants do that. There are a few things that the grant cannot do. The grant cannot help us buy equipment. The grant can also not, and that's with any grant really, do political advocacy work. Most grants don't like that, but although there are specific grants that do, we can also not do fundraising and we cannot do lobbying. And so those are kind of the limitations. Other limitations are related to how we structure and describe any of the things that the grant must include that I just mentioned and that are here on the screen. So that is kind of the most important set of grant details that I wanted to share. And if you have any questions, hold them, but we can later discuss those. let's see, now the grant timeline. Who is doing that? Am I doing that too? All right, good. So the grant would start if we get the money in the early fall of this year. So we have a lot of time after submitting the grant on January 31st to have other conversations as to what we actually want, whether that's going to be funded by this grant or not. But writing this grant proposal was actually an eye-opener. It actually made us aware how many partners want to work with us, because we currently have close to a dozen groups and agencies that want to work with us on this. That's wonderful. And if you want to know who, then I'll mention that a little later. And they're all potentially going to submit a letter of support this week. And that is really important because it means that a lot of groups and agencies are actually very caring about what's happening here in Dixon and are wanting to support that concept of capacity building and working together. So in that period of the next 9 months, we can have more meetings, but then after the grant starts, we would have some team and community meetings and some planning and convening so that we have a very slow, gradual, but thorough beginning of what we're going to do together. We're carrying that over the winter because typically in the winter you cannot do much work outside, so we have plenty of time to prepare. And then in the early spring of 2024, so more than a year from now, we would start with certain hands-on activities in certain suggested places that we would like to write up in the grant. And if there are other suggestions for those locations, we would like to hear them tonight. But there are certain limitations, of course, with whom we can work. But the number of partners that we have so far that are various landowners, including the county, state, make it possible to work at certain locations here around Dixon. And then in the early spring of 2025, so after 18 months, this project would come to an end, at least the funding of it. But then we hope that we have built enough capacity, that we have learned enough and learned to work together and build all those relationships with partners and put certain things on the ground so that that helps us carry it forward together again with that person that is going to be hired to help raise more money and help coordinate future activities together with maybe a steering group or something. And then we have to do some final reporting to close out the project. So the current partners, oh, it's here already on the screen, are the Embudo Valley Library, Trout Unlimited, which has pledged a significant amount of elbow grease, the New Mexico State Land Office, Rio Arriba County, East Rio Arriba Soil and Water Conservation District, Icaris Pueblo, and our company, Ecoton. So various entities here in the village have also expressed support. So we have a good beginning of entities who are interested in supporting this initiative. The proposed activities. Adrian is going to talk about that.
Okay, thank you. I promise I'm not playing Scrabble on my phone. There's people that are trying to get access in, so I'm making sure that they have access. So you'll see me like over there on the computer and on my phone, but I'm present. So I'm going to talk about the proposed activities. My name is Adrian. I do community outreach and monitoring and with these projects. And so like we've said, and I think this is actually somewhat of a repeat, the overarching goals of this project is that community capacity building. And what we're realizing is there's a gap between the restoration activities and a local organization who can actually execute those activities and receive funding and use that funding. An example of that is actually with the 2022 floods, where we realized that in order to qualify for funding or for wildfire funding, more so than flood, sometimes you have to have organizations that are recognized to apply for the funding. And so our hopes are that with the capacity building and the formation of something like a watershed group would actually bridge that gap. So the steering committee, that's the first one, the formation, that's going to be volunteer based. And it will help the community organize themselves and lead to future work. There's community ownership in this and longevity, as well as sustainability, and it's because it is actually community based. Secondly is that coordinator that we spoke of. That's trained and paid, and they will do the grant writing, like we've mentioned, to sustain the work. So I'll go on to the third that hasn't been touched on too heavily, which is the repository at the Embudo Valley Library. And that's where documents that Ecotone has created in the past will reside for the community. Oh, it's okay. It does that. It's a ghost. The repository at EVL will be documents that Ecotone, long before my position, Jan Willem and others have created about the watershed, about erosion control, all these other really important materials. Plus, I imagine it's things that the community can contribute to the repository that they feel is important. What I'm hearing is there's a lot of perhaps native knowledge and Hispano knowledge from this area that could be useful for that repository. So the fourth thing is an educational and monitoring activities. Those would include the presentations, the walks, the demos, the conversations that we have. And that's really to involve the community and also to gauge the community concerns. Fifth is the hands-on restoration workshops. And that will be training instructors. And I'll show you a couple of pictures in a moment here. And that's again, building that volunteer workforce. And there's also a branch of that is finding ways to employ local people. I've heard from people in the community that we need more local jobs, and we've been discussing this and looking for ways to find employment for local people within regional crews. And then also involving youth crews and the YCC crews, as we touched on. So I'm going to show you a map. This is the proposed workshop sites, and I'm going to go from the left, and then I'll go north and down to the south, and then, so I'm going from left to right. And the first one is on Arroyo La Mina. The second one is the west side or downriver from the Bosque Road on a north, let's see, it would be a south-facing arroyo on the north side. Below that is the baseball field. Then to the right, that first purple star. So we're looking at all the purple stars, by the way. The first purple star is the Arroyo de los Arianos. And finally, the Cañonita del Agua. And the reasoning behind this is that there's associated with the planned and ongoing activities that Ecotone has done. It's close to residents, so it impacts flooding and erosion. And also there's access to these places for demos and education. And finally, it's familiar. We are familiar, Jan Willem's familiar with these areas, and they can make a difference in terms of the flooding and erosion that we are seeing. And we'll further define later these spots in community meetings and partner meetings. So here's the exciting part. This is the visuals. These are, this first place is on county land, and this is the baseball field. So you can see in the red circle where it's eroded down the hill towards the baseball field. You can see here the cracked land. There's a lot of eroded arroyos, and you can see the lack of plant life. Here's below some tracks. So again, that really patchy vegetation. I believe I'm seeing siltation and buildup of or depositing of that siltation. That's again Arroyo La Mina. here is this really nice, beautiful wetland. It's in a side arroyo, but it is experiencing head cuts, and it looks like side erosion, so it's starting to channelize. And then the picture on the right, yeah, I believe that is one of the side arroyos that's really heavily eroding. These are some of the structures that we could do workshops and community volunteer building with. The first one on the left is at the top, that's a Zuni bowl. Bill Zedike somewhat coined that structure. It was actually from the Zuni people. He learned it, and then below that is the Zuni bowl catching the sediment. So something as simple as these rock structures that are materials that we can find all over the arroyos, they can actually catch the sediment and then spread the water out. To the right, this is some wicker weirs. So if you see, there's poles sticking out of the ground, and then there is branches, usually juniper, that is weaved in between each of those weirs, and it's in a step fashion. So again, you're having those multiple points of containing and spreading. So there's several other structures, but these are just some examples. Right, these are in the Cañondita del Agua, which is where there's some ongoing projects right now with a contractor named Woodshark. And they usually thin areas, but Jan Willem and Aaron have taught them and shared with them some methods on doing erosion control, which are these. And it's actually helped contain how many tons of sediment did you think?
Roughly estimated just last year, we caught 4,000.
4,000? Yeah, so in the last year, they estimate that it caught 4,000 tons during the flood that we had, and perhaps kept it off the road in Cañoncito and out of people's fields and homes. 300 structures were built in this arroyo. It's not that big. But it's beautiful because there's a lot of, as you can see, the willows establishing in the background. Cottonwoods have come back and rebounded huge. So these are some of the methods that we're looking to bring to the community. Do either of you want to add anything before we go to our intermission?
Well, one of the things we hope to do is actually that we can take tours. We're going to do that hopefully under the existing grants. But it would be always good to take more tours to look at these things that more people learn how they're being built, and maybe some of them need to be made.
So Jan Willem was saying that we're hoping to take tours and bring community up to there and show folks what's going on, and then also maintain them.
This is the wetland that is with a cottonwood just 300, 400 yards south of State Road 580 in Cañoncito. That is one of the drainages on the west side of the entire complex of Arroyo Los Pinos Reales. But Horacio Martinez calls this the Cañadita del Agua, or used to be Grand Horizon, where entire Cañoncito until the 1960s or 50s got their water. And this is BLM land, but just upstream is actually state land. And so we work in this entire area and then in 70 other acres of the entire area around it.
So for the Zoom people, I'll just give a short recap, which is this is basically the arroyo across from Horacio Martinez's place. It's now BLM land, and it used to serve the community for a water source. So let's take our short intermission. Since there's not many of us, I'm wondering if we should cap it.
Maybe there are clarifying questions.
Yeah, sure. So any more questions for clarification, either on Zoom or in the live audience?
There are a lot of notes in the chat. I don't know whether you should address them.
I think there are a lot of mine, but Rachel's been monitoring. So yes, Dan.
My question is, how much of a grant dollar-wise do you get
estimated that?
I'm gonna let Jan Willem take that, and if you want to stand up here, Jan Willem, so people can hear you.
Thank you. The question was how much in dollar amount is available for this grant? So we can get up to $50,000. But the grant, and I should have mentioned that, the grant is a 1-to-1 match. So for every dollar value that is being offered in kind or in cash by any of the 5 or plus more partners, that triggers or leverages another dollar from the foundation. So to give you an example, Trout Unlimited has pledged in-kind labor for more than $10,000. So that will already leverage $10,000 plus dollars in this grant. Riba County has pledged $10,000 plus in-kind labor, might be $12,000, $13,000. I don't know how much. We will get that letter in the next couple of days. So that will trigger that amount in hard dollars from the foundation. And so several other of these partners have offered. We have now close to $30,000 or $35,000 of pledges, and we hope to get close to 40. So I think that by Friday, we might have $40,000 in pledges in terms of letters of support. So that means 40,000 hard dollars to start funding the things that Adrian just mentioned for that position, to pay us for design and oversight, monitoring, and for the logistics of meetings, various other things that we are envisioning in the budget that will really help build that capacity in the community, and money for the library to support them in all this work, plus for any materials necessary for that repository.
Any other clarifying questions?
The only
Yes.
thing I have to say is buy-in by the community. That's a big challenge, I think, that we're gonna face. But I think it's a positive. Scope of work is.
Yeah, so Dan said that buy-in's going to be a big challenge in the community, but a positive. Our scope of work is positive. Yes, scope of work's positive. Did you want to speak to that, or?
Thank you for bringing that up. I think buy-in is essential, and that is actually what community capacity building is actually all about. Because in my experience, there are many poets who have talked about this, and everybody claims to be the first, but there is this relationship between knowing about something, knowing about land, for instance. And if you know more, you love it more. And if you love it more, you want to take care of it more. And it's that simple. That is what we need to cultivate. And I'm actually sure that a lot of people know a lot. And therefore, a lot of people love their land here. And therefore, a lot of people want to take care of it. It is now, how do we organize people in the caretaking, in the sharing and learning with each other, so that everybody then starts to understand what's the right way of caring. And whether you do that towards your children, towards your pets, or towards your backyard, it's all the same. But eventually, as a community, it's important to come to terms with how you do that together. And this grant gives us the unique opportunity, without a lot of strings attached, to do that. And to do that with partners who actually have the knowledge, who own the land, and have the capacity to help the community along. And the community is in the driver's seat. The community can make the choices. And the grant is structured in a way that the community builds its capacity and can choose with which partners it wants to continue. Stop share so we can see.
Sure. So you want to see, I'm going to stop sharing so we can all see. Let's see. Oh, I see what you mean. Wait a second.
He's here.
Let's look here.
So do people in the chat have questions?
No, I think these are just things I've written to people.
Are people in Zoom having questions then? Clarifying questions.
Right. So does anyone else in Zoom have a clarifying question? Okay, I think we should take just a 5-minute break. Get up, stretch, think a little bit. There's some coffee and orange juice and tea in the back, and then we're going to go into the question and answer discussion section. So for those who might have questions but not clarifying questions, the floor will be open then. And we'll see you in 5 minutes. So it's 7:18, so let's say 7:25 just to make my brain happy.
And couldn't make the tea happen, so there's
one more minute for conversations. 1 minute. I'm going to invite everyone to come back so we can start with our question and answer discussion section.
Well, then, bass players are generous that way, just because. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so just a couple of housekeeping things. We have Rachel has posted a link on the chat for the Zoom people of a form if you don't feel comfortable or you'd rather have in writing your responses. There's a link in the chat. That same form is also over there physically. That's all right. We'll all know it's next to the box. So if people want to fill in anything, you're welcome to do that. You're also welcome to voice yourself or to type into the chat. So how this is going to work is basically I'm going to open up the floor, and if people can just chime in, and then I'll invite Rachel or Jan Willem to answer the question or to be involved in the discussion. And if we can all in the present physical audience, just remember that I have to repeat it to the Zoom. So if you feel comfortable, come up to the mic, or if you can just kind of say some things, wait for me to say it, and then go on. That way I can catch up the Zoom. So let's just open up the floor. People want to ask questions, talk. Dan, yes.
I think the scope of work for this project is very interesting. I think that it would behoove you to try and get some elders from the community. I don't know how you reach out to them so that you can perhaps educate them on the scope of the work and maybe get them to get involved.
I think that's a great suggestion. So Dan was saying that he supports the scope of the work, but also it would behoove us to get elders involved in the community. He's not sure how to do that, but it would be very important. So I'm going to dig in just a little bit to ask you, do you think somewhere like the senior center is an appropriate venue? Yeah.
I think another one, I grew up here. A lot of the people, but I've been gone. I own a couple properties here. Stay here during the week. I work for the school district. Another viable avenue would be churches. They have announcements.
Yes.
And I think that Catholic Church, like I was mentioning to a couple people here, the pillars of the, community are your schools and your churches, you know what I mean?
Yes.
You got the co-op here, you got the library, but I mean, to reach out to elders, they attend churches, that might be one avenue that you might pursue.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because I think that really, those are the backbone of the community that perhaps was, well, I know it was before the co-op and before the library. And we reached out, unfortunately, in a very non-personal way through email to the church, to the Presbyterian Church and the Catholic Church. The Presbyterian Church put in their newsletter. Thank you, Charlotte Valdez. The Catholic Church, I've had a hard time getting in touch with people. It was suggested to me to talk to the mayordomo and the mayordomo. Do you have other suggestions of how to? I understand the priest is not really the kind of the organizational head of the church. So what would you say?
I'm a member of the Presbyterian Church, but I'm not involved with the Catholic, and I live in Corrales.
Yeah,
So I don't spend much time here other than during the week, when I'm working, I spend a lot more on weekends when I'm working on my mental problems.
Right.
So I don't really socialize a bunch of folks.
yeah,
Um, I don't know, I think that maybe starting with even the school here with a PAC meeting, trying to get, information out.
yes,
That would be nothing but just,
great.
attend a PAC meeting here for parents or
That's a PAC meeting is
the parents, kind of,
PTA almost.
kind of like that.
Yeah, okay. So just to recap for the Zoom folks, Dan grew up here and he doesn't live here currently except for when he's down for his work, but he also suggested the churches and then also the school and being sure to get into a PAC meeting. And I hope, Jan Willem, are you taking notes? Great.
One other one that was just the meetings that are scheduled for the various membership for the conventions around here.
Yeah, right. So the other suggestion from Dan was the annual membership meetings for the ditches. For all those, like, yes,
And perhaps you could touch base with them almost starting there. There could be
Right.
meetings that you don't have to wait for the year that you call it.
yeah, right. So also touching base with the domos and not necessarily just having to wait for the yearly meeting. And I think that touches on something important that we're thinking about is that these floods brought tremendous amount of siltation into the acequias. And if there's ways to harness that through this grant to mitigate it, it's important to have the acequias evolve. We do have a couple representatives from the Embudo Valley Regional Acequia Association with us. And so maybe they also have suggestions on how to better involve the individual acequias.
Another one,
Yes, yeah, Dan is great.
fire department folks,
Yes,
they know the community. They can communicate out to the community. Sometimes they do fundraisers, maybe they can communicate or they can identify, senior folks that could perhaps get interested.
great. So the last suggestion was the fire department who know people in the community and know senior folks. And we work with the fire department on a different grant. And I believe they're talking about supporting us with a letter of support. Is that correct for this one? No. Okay. But I think it would be really important to ask them the question that you're asking, which is individuals, to point out individuals. So thank you so much for your suggestions. Really. Okay, so Rosalia said, how do you plan on ensuring that partners like Rio Riba Soil and Water Conservation District who have money invested in the project don't override what the community wants. And I'll let Jan Willem take that one.
Thanks for that question. So how this works is that the partners need to discuss their contributions and their work in the partnership team meetings for this project. And that will work at the same time as that the steering group will be developed. So they are just partners, and what they're offering is, for instance, in-kind Youth Conservation Corps participation, and it's a give or take. So if what I mean with that is that if we don't want to work with their Youth Conservation Corps, say a year from now, then we need to figure something out. But it is not that they're having leverage to tell us what to do. That's also not how a soil and water conservation district operates. So in this particular case, I see very little problem with that. However, if you just take, for instance, Rio Arriba County, which is very interested in doing some erosion control in the area around the ball field, and to basically offer their annual maintenance of drainage and stormwater management and erosion control to making that area better. They were already planning that, and it was pure coincidence that we called them up and that they said like, hey, we wanted to do that. Yes, we're totally on board. And they're pledging $10,000 in terms of equipment, maintenance, personnel, cultural resources survey to do this. Now, if the community at some point says, oh, no, we don't want that, well, then we need to be very clear. We'd like to know that now rather than later. But if in a year, year and a half, or in the next half year, there are some concerns about that, then we need to figure that out, because that money leverages dollars that we get from the foundation to, for instance, support the person we want to hire to be the coordinator and grant writer. If we don't have that money, and we cannot hire that person for as much. So there are all those kind of things. We can maybe also separate it out. And we're probably going to do that, the oversight for restoration work will be largely on Ecotone, so that basically we get just less involved, and which that we can separate actually out the things that need to happen, like this coordinator that can be supported in a different way. Whereas the match for the county, I'm just thinking here from the top of my head. So to make this really flexible and working and transparent, it doesn't have to jeopardize really actually the person that's being hired. So I think there are many ways to solve those things, and we need to stay in touch with each other and talk with these partners to make it work. I think they're not going to impose. They are really understanding also that it is a collaborative grant, a grant to work together, learn together, and figuring it out together. And the county also knows, for instance, that if they don't have community buy-in and support, whatever they are investing in that ball field area will not stay very long. So it's also in their benefit that everybody is on board in supporting it. Does this answer the question adequately? Go ahead.
Back to the question of getting people involved, you know, that is there something happening?
No, I'm just gonna do it.
Okay. When the Brutal Valley Regional Safety Association was organized, that got organized because two of us went around and spoke to every commissioner. So we went to all of the commissioners in the entire valley, and we had individual meetings with every one of them. And that's how that came to pass. So that kind of groundwork is probably essential. The other thing is that I think it's a conundrum. It's a very interesting question as to how you can claim, how anyone can claim, or how you can figure out what the will of the community is. I mean, that's something that needs to be addressed. And I basically am very supportive of the work that's been done. And I think a lot of good, further work can be done. I think it really needs to be done. And I think we can feel our way through this in some way. I will say, the reason that the Umberto Valley Regional Safety Association did not enter in as a partner was because we were lacking in information at the time that it came to our meeting last week. And we don't have a way to have a meeting without 2 weeks notice. So our hands were kind of tied, and that was that. But anyway, that's my thoughts right now.
There's a second question. So did you want to respond to Robert, and did you want to, was there anything you wanted to respond to Robert with, or before we move on to the next question?
Maybe I didn't pay adequate attention. I heard support. It was just a comment.
It was a comment.
Right. I
Yeah.
heard a comment.
Yeah, I didn't know if you want to respond to that, but we can move on.
I don't think.
So the next question is from Rosalia. Why is there a rush to apply for this grant ahead of meaningful engagement with the community? What would it hurt to pause and engage with the community up front and then apply for the grant in a year or two after community engagement? So.
Again, thanks for the question. I can understand maybe that there is a sense of a rush. My perception is maybe not that of a rush, because I've been thinking about these things for maybe 10 years here. But the problem with these rushes is how these grant applications work, because you have so little time to put it together. And that we have not adequately taken time in advance to meet with the community. So that I can totally see that it is feeling rushed. The situation is now that we have a potential for leveraging the ongoing activities. So there are several activities going on with various grants. We've just recently had the problems with the flooding. And I must say, in the last 10, 12 years that I've been here, we've had a lot of these conversations already. And they said step A, but they never did step B. And my sense is that it might be timely to see if this can be another step A, but with the grant enabling us to do step B. And so like Rachel expressed, or maybe you said it, Adrian, we can also lay the grant aside if actually in the next half year people don't like it. So we don't have to feel rushed. The grant also gives us a year and a half to really talk amongst each other while building that capacity. The grant gives us the chance of paying somebody, so that it doesn't all have to be volunteer time. if we want to pay multiple people, maybe even that can be done. And if people feel in the next few days that we have to have not one position, but two, or identify monies for, how do you call that? How do you call it, when people get a stipend or something like that, right? We can build that in too. So that encouragement is being given for people to step up and do really work that actually should be paid. Because so much is being done by volunteer work that not everybody can equally participate. So I hope that with a grant like this, it will help stimulate conversation and learning from each other. And I don't think that there is a need for that to wait. The community can do this even without the grant in the next 9 months. And then if we have put in and we're successful, and we even get some money in October to continue it and build more support. So there is no barrier to not have those meetings that are being proposed here. So there is no need to pause with the grant. And if we don't want the grant in October, then you can give it back. So I understand the feeling. And on the other hand, I think, what is there to lose? I don't see how it can hurt. But I'm sorry you're not here, so that we could have a conversation, because these questions are very good for a face-to-face conversation.
I just wanted to make sure if anyone else wanted to respond to that topic, or if Rosalia, you had something else to say. Looks like Robert's approaching the mic, so I'll give it over to Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I am supportive of having these conversations. And there's been a lot of conversation in the last week about this, and some of it revolves around whether this grant really is about water quality downstream, or whether it really is about water quality here and also help to the acequias in terms of flooding from the arroyos and also to homeowners. And I think that's a very important piece, is to because in reality, we know that the acequias do a lot of work already to stop a lot of influx of runoff into the river. And people, one of the things that has been voiced all week is that we could barely even maintain the acequias. We just don't have people. And so then you think of adding on this other capacity building. Capacity building starts sounding like volunteer labor from some local person. And so it can seem a little overwhelming. So I think all these things have to somehow be talked out. But I don't think there's any question, and particularly the fact that all these agencies were involved, and the Picaris Pueblo is involved, because it is a watershed-wide situation that we have to deal with. It's not going away. So I think there's a lot of issues to be talked about, but and I'm not sure how, I've been in this room with 60 to 100 people for a meeting like this before. And since COVID, it's just changed. It's all changed. And, it was easy to turn out 50 people and people that had opinions and thoughts about it. So I'm not sure how we do that. I'm not sure how we get to that. But anyway, that's my thoughts. Thank you.
I hope you can hear me, and I'm sorry if I'm kind of, you must be, because I see you're going stepping off. I think that's my point, is that if we have these community engagement conversations up front, we might find out that we have an aging demographic that's not capable of supporting this type of work that needs to be done at this moment. I think meaningful community engagement can come at the front end, because it's going to be really rare that we would have somebody step up and say, hey, I'm going to turn down $100,000. That's going to be a really hard thing to do, where it's a really easy thing to say, hey, let's take a step back. This community deserves enough respect to have a year of engagement before we apply for this grant, or we seek out other grants that could fit in this similar capacity. But before we do that, we find out if our community has the capacity to undertake this sort of work, the labor in which you're asking it to do. And are we meaningfully engaging not only people who tend to show up to meetings who are called upon, or are we doing the harder work and really trying to get full community engagement, going beyond putting a poster up in a church and starting to knock on doors, calling neighbors, seeking out the meaningful engagement that might be needed now, ahead of having to say, hey, no, we turned down this money.
I hear you, and I cannot answer that. That is really not my place to. I can give you information based on certain things that have been brought up. And so to address some of the points, I heard Robert ask about where the benefit would be downstream or locally. In our little planning group, we had really envisioned that the need is local. So the capacity building needs to be, from our perspective, a response to the need to answer issues of the impacts of flooding and drought and erosion and those kind of things. And the siltation of acequias, silt on the road. And the cause of all these things is the drought degradation and impacts on the upland areas. So work in the upland areas around the wetlands would be, I think, a useful thing to mitigate, to lessen the impact of things like flooding and sedimentation and erosion farther downstream in the village, that is, not in the Rio Grande or anywhere else. So just right here. And therefore to create places that are also accessible and where people can learn. So that's why the suggestions were for places that are in walking distance from the main road and where it is visible and where there can be a dialogue around those places, even for people who are not able to hike half a mile or a mile into more of the wild canyons. I totally understand that with the aging community and not enough labor for the acequias, that it might be true, or at least perceived, that a grant like this may be more of a burden than a help. And so that is something that certainly should be figured out. On the other hand, I heard also mentioning all the institutions that already exist, the churches, the senior center, where people gather and where you can actually get the information out, share with people. And we don't have to have a whole lot of activities. It can be in the pace that is appropriate for the community. In terms of the hands-on things, hands-on activities, I think, and I was not even anticipating that a lot of elderly people would physically participate. I think that would not be possible. So that's also why there is a possibility to start interacting with, say, a youth conservation corps. And that maybe one or two youth from the community can apply, or maybe many can apply, but maybe one or two or three are chosen to be in that. Or that we participate and work together with the Picaris crew or with other groups, so that actually the capacity from the immediate environment is leveraged to help out here, which may open new opportunities as solutions for problems that currently exist in different areas, maybe for acequia maintenance, who knows? So I understand that it is maybe an initiative that is asking certain things from the community, and on the other hand, the community can take its time, definitely until October and even into the life of the grant, to figure a lot of these things out. But if that is felt as too much pressure, then yeah, then maybe we need to not pursue it, and then wait until many people feel that the time is right. But I have a sense that the time can be right now to at least put in for it and see how things evolve October, November, and a year from now, to see how you pick up that opportunity. And so if you don't ask, if you don't fish, you don't get a fish. And that's how I see it. And you don't know whether you'll get a small fish or a big one, and how you can handle the fishing pole. But that can be figured out. And so I think it is an opportunity. And there are very few strings attached. So that's how I see it. And I hope that other people have other perspectives on how this can be addressed. But it's a valid question, Rosalia, and I appreciate that you bring it forward.
Okay, yes,
I
Dan.
to respect the comment that was made by her. However, I see an opportunity here. And I think that when there's an opportunity, I think that you should pursue it. And through the course of navigating through this effort, you might decide down the road that maybe you don't want to do it. But I think there's a good opportunity that you can start cultivating the buy-in into this project.
Okay, so Dan says that he can understand the concerns about community engagement on the front end. He does think that there is an opportunity, and that when there's opportunity, it's advantageous to go for it. And that the community can figure out if indeed it wants to have a different direction when the time comes. Did I get that correct, Dan?
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
if you apply for it, you get it, and the community doesn't really back it up, then I think you can back off and say, you're not gonna pursue it.
Okay. So he just restated that we can apply, and if the community doesn't want it, we can back off and not pursue. Something and Rosalia, because this is your question, I definitely want to leave the space open for you to engage back in the conversation, but something that I have heard from community members when thinking about this question of what is meaningful consensus around what the community wants. And we, as an unincorporated town, have actually no deciding legal body or representative body. We have a bunch of institutions. And so at what point do we say, yes, this is what the community wants? Because it's to our advantage that we're not incorporated. but also it leaves us in a position of, who gets to say what the community is and isn't. And I don't think that one institution can do that. I'll say that personally. But that's something that has been brought into the conversation. So if you feel the need to respond to that person's concern about representation, since we're an unincorporated community. Yeah.
Well, two things that I can share. First of all, Rosa, you mentioned the amount of $100,000. Let's make it very clear, we're not going to get $100,000. The max for this grant opportunity is 50, and we're not probably going to even touch that. It will be somewhere between 30 and 40. And so that is a sizable amount, but it is not a huge carrot that then puts so much pressure on the community that you don't want to not take it. And so also it is also the collaboration with the different partners can be structured a different way. So it might, of course, raise the concern that the 5 partners who are signing on to are disappointed, and that is a point. But they will also understand that if the community is not ready, that their offer, and it's not really an investment that can be leveraged, it's just a promise, it's a pledge of helping with elbow grease. They're not putting any dollars on the table, really. So we need to all understand that. They're helping, and that leverage is the money from the foundation. So they may be disappointed, but I think they will understand that if the community is not ready to receive their help, that their investment from their part is not going very far. So that's, I want to make that very clear. And then the other thing that I've learned in community capacity building and community consensus building that I really like is that it is not about the things we're going to do. It is about the sense of us, the sense of community, being together. And so this is really an opportunity to build community. And these activities that we're proposing are only a pathway. And they're an important pathway, and they're a pathway that actually is likely a pathway that many want in one way or another to follow if there is a grant that we even offer you money to do this. But I'm trying to say, having some form of a coordinating body, having a coordinator that is paid, and learning from each other in many different ways, from information that's on the shelf or on a website, information that's being shared in meetings, in presentations, in walks and talks, and in hands-on learning for those people who are not so drawn to learning from books or from sitting in meetings. Those are multiple different ways of learning and interacting with each other that create opportunities for a broad spectrum of people to interact and learn. So, and that is the richness that this grant offers us. Plus then the time. There's a lot of unstructured time between now and when it starts, and we can decide the structure when it goes on. And then what I wanted to say is that in terms of decision-making, I have never experienced any community where unanimity in a diversity of community like it is in Dixon, or even in smaller communities like even a family, would work really well. Because then you are often in a situation of no action, in which then the community is languishing more than is useful. So I hope we're all there. Then what I think is really important is everybody believes in what is good for the community, that those people who don't like it love the community well enough to see that the majority really wants something and believes in something, and that they go along, even if they don't like it that much, because they do like the community and they see it's good for the community and for the unity that you're creating together. for the us feeling. And I think that's what I teach my children too, that you may not like it all, but if you really feel that it's important to be part of our family, then sometimes you can go along with something. And sometimes I may not like something, but I go along too, because it's really important for me to be part of the family. And I hope that that sense of unity can be grown. And not everybody has to agree, as long as we can agree to disagree and we stay together, and then the next person has an opportunity next time to like what is going to be proposed. And maybe this doesn't apply to actually what's going on in Dixon. I don't live here, but I want to give that as just a suggestion for how actually you can move forward and grow together. That's what it's worth, what I have to add.
I'm going to open back up. I have in my mind questions that have come to me through other people that I'll ask in a moment, but I want to give other people in the room and on Zoom to ask or to respond. Oh, Robert's not coming to the mic.
Kind of technical question. In the grant application, it said that there's no money from the grant that's supposed to go towards fundraising. Yet in your description of the hired project coordinator, part of their job is to do grant writing. So it seems like somewhere that line needs to be drawn. I mean, if they're not doing direct fundraising, but grant writing is at least related to fundraising. So somewhere there's a line. So I'm just wondering how you clarify that when you write the grant.
So Ben's question is that the grant says there can be no fundraising. However, within our proposal, there is a position for a coordinator who will be writing grants, which is a form of fundraising. And so how is there going to be a clear line between the two?
Thanks. Wow. That didn't occur to me, and it is excellent that you brought it up. And so we have to find a solution to that. And I suppose that maybe the coordinator could help in different ways and take over from those people who are not so involved, who then help write the grants and relieve those people so that we are shifting tasks around so that we're legally not actually fundraising or proposal writing. What we can do also in the next couple of days is actually ask the foundation people if actually grant writing is part of their fundraising definition or whether they have another definition for that. But I think that you're probably right. So thank you very much. We also need to figure out whether it's fundraising from federal sources. Sometimes there are all kind of other issues, but thank you for that point. And that's something we need to resolve. Yeah.
So one question that's been asked to me, Jan Willem, is structurally, can you describe the difference between the steering committee that will be created and the five-star partners? So can you define the differences in their roles and responsibilities within the grant and the execution of the grant?
So the partners are those people who promise for this grant application to put their in-kind time and activities forward to leverage the dollars of the foundation. And the project is offering the opportunity to create a steering group or some group in the community, an action team, to start structuring how we want input, how we want to run the grant, and what is going to happen afterwards. And so it may be that that steering group invites people from that partnership to participate, and they can structure entirely themselves who they are, where it starts. I may not be part of it. I don't know. I think it has to start somewhere here in the community amongst yourselves to figure out how you start a leadership group. And it may be just those people who have a passion and an interest, have time and willingness to be the spark plug to step forward, form a team, and then discuss how to move forward. I would suggest that several partners are, at least in the beginning, invited to sit around the table, maybe as guests, as informants to the process. And then later, once the structure is created, they can be part-time partners, they can be just informants, or if the community really wants to include them, they can be permanent members of that steering group. But that is really, there are many different options, and there are groups in northern New Mexico that have gone through this. So you're never alone. You can go to many different organizations that have this kind of background. The Santa Fe Community Foundation annually organizes workshops, how to even get started with these groups. So there is a lot of knowledge already in northern New Mexico to help you figure out how to do this in an effective way, and then you can choose a method that is most appropriate for this community. So to summarize, there is definitely a difference between the partners of this grant and the steering group that is going to be created under this grant. And it's up to the community to choose how you want to structure that and take it from there.
Other questions, concern, discussions? What does the coordinators pay? Jan Willem's shrugging his shoulders as in, we haven't defined it.
There's an amount in the budget.
There's an,
Pardon?
There's an amount in our draft budget for the.
Oh, yeah. So we're tentatively allocating $10,000 for that. So, but how much that is in terms of hourly and how many hours, we haven't set that at all, and I don't think the grant requires us. So, and even if we have to put something in right now and need to change that, that is typically possible. Once you get the grant contract to sign, you can renegotiate a lot of those things. And so that is pretty common. So even if we have to tell the grant organization later on, well, we have found clarity in the community how to structure this and we need to make changes, we'll propose that. And if they don't want to go along, well, then we need to drop either parts of the grant or all of it. So I think it's quite typical that those things are shaking out over time in an application. Even with very strict grants from the EPA or the State Environment Department, you can go through changes upfront and during the life of the grant. And I'm expecting with the flexibility that this grant offers, that it is possible too.
and I'm wondering, this is my question of Adrian. It also sounds like the coordinator can be split into more than one person. Okay. Great. Yeah, Ben.
Should I assume that the library is responsible for administering the grant? Or the money goes through the library and the reporting, the library is responsible for the reporting? and, just the overall project, I mean, outside of what the coordinator does, but the grant management, basically.
So Ben's question is, should he assume that that the library is the one that is actually administering the grant and outside of the coordinator? Do you want to answer that, Rachel?
Yes. We're, one of the things that I would have, I think in an ideal situation, the coordinator would be learning alongside as we're doing some of that work and well, I guess depending on who that person or those people are, then they might have those skills already, or they might be starting from scratch. But I think that there would be some training involved. I think that's part of the thinking here. But one of the things that the library does on a kind of limited scale, but it is something that we do, is support local organizations that are starting up by being a fiscal sponsor. And so we have the 501c3 and so they, the money would go through the library to, from the grant to the coordinator and to whatever other expenses there are. I would assume that we would likely be responsible for reporting as well, although I would consult with others. I wouldn't just be a lone wolf on that.
There a budget to pay you for all that work that you need to do? Or is that part of what you already paid?
This would be, part of this would be, Karen asked, is there a budget to pay the library for doing that work? That would be part of our match as a partner. And I believe there might be a little bit of funding for us. That I think is to be determined at this point.
Well, initially, we had offered to pay for it all, right? And then you said, well, maybe you can offer that to that.
Oh, yeah.
So we can still balance it out.
Yeah. So we're still figuring that out. Yeah, and it sounds like there might be some flexibility there now, especially with these partners that are coming in, which is wonderful. So it would just be a matter of committing the time. And to me, if it is something that has at least some sort of community support, then it does align with our mission, very much so, then it's worth putting in that time.
Okay. Any remaining questions? Yes, Dan. Okay, so the question is, how do we move forward from this point? I think that's a good wrap-up question. So we'll take that as our conclusion. Ron Bone?
What just came to mind for me is that if there are more questions, or if there's a need to discuss things more, that we could have a conference call with several people. And so I totally understand if maybe certain answers here tonight were not satisfactory. And I don't know whether certain concerns that were raised are weighty to the point that we should consider not moving forward. So I heard suggestions of support and suggestions of caution and suggestions of strong caution. And so I think that that actually, yeah, merits even maybe a conversation in the next couple of days to see if what was shared here tonight at least offers an opportunity for some people to be at least comfortable or ready to stand and wait and see to see whether this even floats when we submit the proposal next week, or whether we should not at all submit next week. And so I don't know how to read it. I have a sense that there is relatively strong support from some people here and from the partners that we've had. So I would welcome people to come and contact us. Is that a good way of dealing with it? I don't know, but that's, we can proceed with writing the proposal. We need to get the letters of support by Friday and then actually put the budget together. It has to be submitted on Tuesday. But yeah, the level of community support, I don't know how to gauge that.
Okay, like most things in life, not totally conclusive. I said, like most things in life, not completely conclusive, but open. So we will email everyone with if there's a conference call to make sure that you, if you want to show up and share more, you're there. And thanks for all your time tonight. Thanks to Jan Willem for working very hard on this, and Aaron who's not here, and to Rachel as well. And thank you all for showing up, and the conversation will be continuing. So thank you.
And if there is the form, it's in the box over there. If you did have any thoughts or